Keith. I don't think we're very far behind him.
We are really, really, really. He lied on his application. I have it from a good authority that he's north of 60.
So not true.
I am way behind all of you guys, just so you know.
Yes.
Way behind.
We have everybody that we're
is now joining.
Yeah, we have multiple guests, Mr. Mayor, for the second item.
Should have done that one first.
He can always switch the agenda. The mayor's prerogative.
That might be a good idea. No reason to keep people waiting.
All right, so let's start the work session. We're recording whoever we need to record, and taking attendance, but for all who's here. So it's our city council work session for Tuesday, special city council work session for Tuesday, November 10th. Two topics on our calendar for our agenda for today: marijuana and garbage. So is there a general consensus? We'd like to start with garbage.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
Kristen's right there. Yeah, she's here. She's ready to go.
All right, Joe.
So you may recall, and I'm going to have Chris Bell, who's on the call, pull up a presentation, a short presentation for tonight, and then all the folks from Pride Disposal or our franchise hauler are here to answer questions. We did our normal review over the summer, and you may recall that we had at the time rumors of a metro tipping fee increase on the horizon, but we didn't know specifics. So we decided in fall, let's revisit in November. Maybe we'll know more by that point, and then council can get that information and then make a decision about any possible rate increase for next year in time. So that's what brought us here. I've been sharing a lot of information about the proposed tipping fee increase with council over the last few weeks. Chris Bell, our consultant, has been following that closely, and of course Pride has been following that closely as well. Metro is scheduled at this point on December 3rd to make a decision, the Metro Council, on whether or not to enact that tipping fee increase, which would go into effect, I believe, January 1st. It is a significant tipping fee increase. It's about 10% or close to 10%. We can get into those numbers. It would affect rates. We can talk about that tonight as well. And then we are also hearing rumors from Metro that there will be another potentially significant tipping fee increase July 1st of 2021. So not only one in January, but another one in July.
And 22 as well, it sounds like.
And 22 as well. So these are significant rate increases that have raised concerns in the region among haulers, elected officials, and certainly city managers around the region as well. So with that intro, are there any questions before I turn it over to Chris to kind of quickly go through some numbers, and then we can answer questions folks might have. Ultimately, I'm looking for some direction from council about what would you like to do in terms of enacting or considering a rate increase for 2021. And the timing of that is what I'm looking for tonight. So any questions before I turn it over to Chris? All right, Chris, if you can figure out how to share your screen.
All right. Is it on there?
It is.
All right. All right. We fixed that. All right. Fix that. If you recall, we had this work session a couple months ago, and we were looking at the projected 2021 rates. And like Joe was saying, there was that unknown of what Metro was going to do. And so what we proposed is a slight increase for commercial and a slight adjustment for Dropbox for 2021. This would be incurred on, or the rate increase would be implemented on January 1st. And so this right here is the results of the rate review. for 2021. And again, there was a slight increase for commercial. We were looking at 0.6% to keep it within the adjustable rate, sitting at 10%. And as we explained, we didn't know what the increase was going to be. Recently, Metro came out with their proposed increase, and there's two components to it. One of them is called the tonnage fee, which is the cost for Metro to transfer, transport, and dispose of the waste, and the other are the regional system fee and taxes. And there are two and they're the component of that regional system fee is going to increase by $2.65 on January 1st under the Metro proposal. And prior to that, on July 1st last year, they adjusted the excise tax by 90 cents per ton. So we've had, within the last 5 months, one increase of 90 cents per ton. The other proposal that Metro is looking to do is there's a decrease in tons from 2019 from 2020 to 2019 or 2019 to 2020. And to ensure that Metro has adequate tonnage flowing through their facilities, they're proposing decreasing the tonnage allocated to Pride by 5% for 2021.
Because, explain that specifically.
Well,
so they're wanting to guarantee their same allocation to their facility?
Yeah, under the way Metro has established the system, 40% of all tons are supposed to be flowing through their transfer facilities, and the other 60% to the other privately held facilities that are located around the metropolitan area. So in order to ensure that they've got adequate tons going to their facility, and they did this they did this a long time ago to ensure that they had adequate revenues to pay for the bonds that I believe were paid off 8 or 9 years ago. But
so they have no debt.
Oh, correct.
That original argument left.
Correct. And so, you're looking at Pride. So they've got a couple things going. They've got a $2.65 increase on the regional system fee. They've got a fixed costs, and most people who are in business realize that if you got fixed costs and you reduce those amount of units that are coming through your facility, the unit cost is going to increase, and Pride's no different. And then they also have contractual agreements with the landfill that they're currently using, with the transfer and trucking company that they have, and also the union wages and everything are going to escalate on January 1st. So they've got costs that they're going to increase. So they're estimating under the current tonnage allocation with the regional system fee that their cost per ton is going to increase from 105.55 to 110.13 per ton, and that's with this proposed Metro increase. And so the overall impact to the residential ratepayer who has a 35-gallon cart is around 31 cents per month. And then for a commercial customer, if they've got a yard of waste picked up once a week, they're going to see their invoice increase by $1.17. And you can see on there, if they got a 4-yard, then they're looking at around a $4.68 increase just for the disposal increase proposed by Metro. And this is kind of a comparable of the cost between Metro and Pride. And one of the things I wanted to point out as we're looking at this is, the 2021 waste volume that Metro is estimating to receive in 2021, 651,000 tons to their 2 facilities. Pride is looking at around just under 71,000 tons. And, capacity level, Metro can handle 1.1 million, whereas Pride can handle 130,000. When I was talking with Eric earlier, and Kristen can chime in on this, if they didn't change operations right now, they could handle 130,000 tons. If they had a ramp up, Eric was estimating over 150,000 tons they could handle through the facility in Sherwood. So the one question as far as capacity within this specific area, there's plenty of capacity. If the tipping fee is approved by Metro, the overall increase on the on the customer is calculated here. And so we're looking at, I had 31 cents, it's 32 cents. It's a fraction of a cent either way to increase that regional system fee and the tonnage increase. So we're looking at a 1.1% increase for residential repairs just to pay for the metro increase. And remember that there was no operational increase. So this increase would be specifically to address the increasing tipping fee for metro. Commercial would increase by that 0.6% plus the 27 cents per collected yard of waste. With that, open for discussion.
So this is Keith. Have you seen any analysis from Metro explaining why and where, to defend their increases? I haven't. I've asked for it.
So I'll let Chris and Kristen respond as well. I have not seen anything from Metro to explain thoroughly why they need such a significant increase.
I typically get carbon copied on information that's sent to the local city staff and county staff, and I haven't seen anything, and I'm not aware of anything officially that's come out.
Yeah, the only information that I've received is the information that just came out on, I think, end of last week. It was the proposed rates with the kind of 2-pager that went along with it that didn't have a lot of information. Just this afternoon or late this morning, I got an email about a question and answer session that Metro is going to be holding on the tip fee on Monday, but it didn't have any supporting documents. It was just here's a meeting if you'd like to get more information. So as of yet, I don't have any additional information as to the reasons behind the increase. I have some anecdotal information in terms of due to the economy and COVID, they've had to dip into their reserves and they need to build those reserves up on the backs of all of the facilities, as well as potentially raise additional funds for the proposed Metro West facility in Cornelius, a third public facility. But I don't have the details of like X number of dollars or for each of those things.
Yeah, I got that email and I responded back and said, please forward the copy of the PowerPoint presentation for Monday and any financial details to support the suggested increase, and I got nothing back. I pinged Councilor Dirksen as well. I've got nothing back from him either. What, from a process standpoint, when would Metro's fee increase go into effect, and how long does our partners at Pride need to? How much advance time do they need to put the increase, if approved by Metro, into place at the same time?
So again, Mr. Mayor, I believe December 3rd is the decision, again, without a lot of good details and information from Metro. I don't know if it's an immediate type thing or if it probably goes into effect January 1st is my understanding. Usually, Kristen, if we're going to do some kind of rate increase, we try to do that in late November, early December to give you enough time to implement the billing and everything. So maybe you can talk about what timelines you need for any kind of rate increase, not necessarily just for January 1st. So.
Yeah, generally due to the way that our billing cycles fall, as long as we know, this is perfect world scenario, we've dealt with other scenarios, but as long as we know, for example, if there was to be a January 1st increase, as long as we know prior to December 10th, because December 10th would be the first bills that would go out to some customers that would have a January billing on it. We have some jurisdictions that sometimes pass rate increases retroactively. We have a way to deal with that if it comes to that. But in a perfect world, we would know about 20 days before it would take effect, so we could get it into our system as well as notify customers.
When was Metro meeting to make a decision?
I think it's going to a vote on December 3rd.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious as to what the messaging looks like then to customers. That doesn't seem like enough time. And like you said, December 10th, if the first bills are going out, there's the potential, possibly, I guess, to not have the messaging in place for those first bills, and people are receiving an increase maybe on the bill, but not any kind of special insert or rate increase message on bills. I'm not a fan of that.
And is all those signals we're getting from Metro saying they're gonna, if something is approved on the 3rd, that it'll be effective January 1st?
I thought I read something somewhere that was later. But
It's actually the 4th, which I think is just a technicality because the 1st is a holiday and it's a Friday, so it's the first business day of the new year. It is the 4th on their documentation.
Oh, what a great regional partner, Metro.
And just so I understand right, if not for this increase in tipping fee, we wouldn't need to be increasing rates to our customer, to your customer.
A little bit, a small increase on commercial. Am I correct?
A small increase on commercial and a small increase on Dropbox.
Nothing on residential.
Correct.
what's the normal?
Would that be something we would still be doing now, or would we typically wait though and do that at our normal time?
We would be doing that now. Let's say Metro was not raising their tipping fees. We'd probably be having this discussion and just making sure everyone understood what the background was for the small rate increase. And then I would bring a resolution probably at your next meeting to enact that in time for January 4th. One of the questions I have is, do you do that without putting the Metro stuff in there and let the process play out, or do you wait until the process plays out? I think there's going to be a pretty strong effort, and I'm speaking more from the city manager's side. There is a lot of concern about this and the lack of transparency and the lack of information to justify this in the middle of a COVID pandemic, to raise tipping fees so significantly and then essentially say we're going to do it again July 1st. So city managers that I've
zero supporting documentation.
Yeah. So if I understand this correctly, we don't know why they're doing it, and we don't really know what it's going to benefit, where the money is going. Do we know where that's going, or did I miss that?
Nope, you're correct.
So if a constituent was to ask us what this is about, we have no answer.
Yep.
Other than
that Metro.
Other than blame Metro and go talk to Metro.
Yep.
So unlike us as a city where we collect money for water or sewer and we can't use that for other things, Metro isn't tied to that same philosophy.
No.
Collect money for garbage, use it for garbage stuff.
Mike or Chris might be able to speak to this. There are certain rules they're supposed to follow within their tip fee. There's the regional system fee that is designated as only appropriate for certain solid waste and recycling funds. The excise tax is for certain things. Mike could speak to that in a little bit more detail. So there is some guidance there. There's not a lot of transparency, I think, once they collect the money, but there is, the regional system fee is supposed to be used for regional education. So Sherwood gets an allocation of that, which is part of the Washington County Cooperative. So Washington County collects that money for the cities that are part of the cooperative and does the regional countywide education, business outreach, decals, brochures, things like that. So there is some level of that. And then the tonnage fee amount, which is right now around $64 of their current tip fee, is to pay for the operations of their facilities. And then there's $1 a ton for the community enhancement program, just like we pay $1 a ton to Sherwood for the community enhancement grant. So there are components of it, I would say, that are tied to specific things. But whether all that regional system fee money truly stays in that bucket, I can't speak to that.
And Councilor Young, I think the other kind of big question mark in terms of timing is this proposed Cornelius facility, which I think, I've shared information with council. A lot of questions around that has a significant price tag compared to other facilities that have been built. Chris can talk about some facilities in Washington State that have been built that significantly less expensive than what Metro is proposing. And I have a question about, are we raising tipping fees to pay for that project in Cornelius? So you're basically cutting the allocation to our hauler, and we have excess capacity here to spend money on a facility in Cornelius that, for me, I'm not yet convinced that that's necessary. And then when you throw the amenities that we saw in the survey that I shared with you, it just raises a lot of question marks. And this seems very rushed with a lack of information and transparency. And no offense to Metro, but I think that's probably one of the reasons their transportation measure failed, is it felt rushed and they didn't necessarily listen to the business community. And I say once again, we're in a pandemic and in a downturn in an economy. Is it really the time to be raising rates and not telling us why?
So historically, what is the process Metro would go through for something like this? What have they done in the past? Because you're right, this is totally rushed, there's no transparency, but I'm assuming they have a more robust process that they've used in the past. What does that look like?
Well,
So Kristen and Chris, can you respond to that? I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, you were going to say something.
well, they're both things.
Metro.
Go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead, Chris. While you do that, I'm going to pull up some supporting documentation to answer that question.
So typically they do, if they're going to make a rate change, they do it in July each year. They were prepared to do an increase this year of, I think, around $8.80, somewhere in that range. And then they delayed it due to everything going on with COVID and the economy, and they decided to postpone it. And so now they're proposing this larger one. In terms of the transparency around that, Mike or Chris might be able to speak to that. There used to be actually a rate committee that Mike sat on that was about Metro tip fees, and there were public members and industry members that sat on this committee, and Metro staff had to present the background and reasoning behind increases, and then that committee would make a recommendation to council, and then council would ultimately make the vote. I don't think there's been that level of transparency in probably close to 10 years. But I don't know what level there was before when you actually sat on the committee.
Yeah, it used to be public, like Kristen said, public and haulers and staff, and sometimes a council member was a contact person. And one of the public members was a fellow that was with a group that watched the PUC and made sure all of the state tax things were justified by gas companies and stuff. They disbanded it because they felt they took it internally. Now they use, quote unquote, a third party, but it's an internal review of their expenses. And they also took the garbage fees at one point during that 10-year period. They reorganized Metro into several departments, and they put a little bit of garbage related issues in every department. Parks, because you've got trash to pick up, so then they can justify those expenses through the garbage fees. It's really hard to track the FTEs also through that. And Metro has said over the last year they were going to go up about $10 last July, and they want to go up $10 every year for 5 years to get that up to $150 a ton, so they can fund the new facility on the west side, and they want to replace Metro South and Central both. They said those facilities are aging, but then they want to do a lot of other stuff with that regional system fee money that maybe or may not be garbage related. It's tough being a tax collector when you don't even get a chance to say where it goes.
Yeah, because I was just looking at the information you sent out, Joe, on the history of Metro tipping fees.
Yes.
And going back to 1980, I can't see any 1 year increase even close to this. I think they were, and I'm just glancing at this, but it looks like about $5 is the largest one I can find, and they're usually $1 to $2, maybe $3. So they're talking about $10 a year for 3 years. This is, if any time there's a need for transparency, this is it.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing. that exact same thing.
The
Did they indicate at all what they're anticipating the July increase looking like?
$10.
$9-10.
Yeah, I haven't heard since this new number for January came out, but originally when they were proposing around the 880 something in July of this year, that was where they were talking about around $10 a year over a 3-year period.
Somebody was asking about the process, and Metro typically will update their solid waste management plan for 10-year intervals, and they just recently did this. I believe it was completed in 2018. And on page 93 of that document, there's a section of the plan that addresses the necessity investments in infrastructure. And goal 16.5 requires Metro to evaluate the feasibility of establishing a publicly owned facility in Washington County to accept and transfer garbage, recycling, food scraps, household hazardous waste, and other materials. And my question is, where has this study been? What I sent to Joe earlier today is a comparable study that I completed with a AECOM, which is a large national engineering firm that did such a facility, and where you look at the waste that's going to be generated, the transportation to that facility, the cost of that facility, the layout, who's going to be impacted, and that study goes to all of the, in this case it went to the city of Sandy and the local jurisdictions to determine whether that facility should be built or not. And that was a partnership, and that was a working collaboration of 3 different jurisdictions to determine whether a facility is needed. And I just assumed when the talk of this facility on Washington County was coming out that there would be something similar, that there would be a study, there'd be sites that were reviewed, the traffic would review, the tons, where the tons would be, and there has been nothing. And the speculation is that facility is going to be anywhere from 60 to over $100 million. The facility that we looked at in Sandy is adequate enough to handle this waste. We're looking at $12 to $20 million tops, and it had a household hazardous waste facility. It had everything that Metro is looking to do. So you've got a really variance in between $20 million, a usable, realistic facility, and an $80 million facility. And again, the overall impact on the ratepayers, on a 20-year facility, on a 20-year bond, which is around $10 per ton just for that facility, not to mention the operational cost. So that's the process that we would typically expect to build a facility of this magnitude, and we haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I sent an email to Metro today asking for their study.
And
It was
just for
very-
There's also
clarity,
a question on what they're going to do with the tonnage cap as well, because right now they've got a 40% for themselves, that's in their code, and they have 2 facilities. If they build a third, do they stick at 40%, or do they then claim that they need 60%, which then would decrease the allocation to all of the other private transfer stations even further?
Mm-mm.
But you've already demonstrated, at least with 2 facilities in the report, that they're only being utilized at 50% load. And if that's similar to the other facilities in the region, there's no justification from a capacity standpoint from building a new facility on the west side.
The comments that we've made to them in regards to this west side facility is that the west side of the region is somewhat underserved in terms of public self-haul as well as household hazardous waste, because right now, except for the regional collection events that they do every year, in order to drop off hazardous waste, you have to drive to one of the 2 Metro facilities, Metro South or Metro Central, and there's no public self-haul for general residential garbage on this side of the region. So the comments that we have made to them is, if you want to truly fill a gap, then you should build a much smaller, scaled down facility that can handle the household hazardous waste and the public self-haul, but that is not designed to handle large commercial haulers, because that need has been met by the private industry for the last 20 years when Metro did not step up and build that facility. And now they're trying to build a facility on this side for those materials when the private investments have been made because Metro hadn't stepped up and done that years ago. So I think, there's a little bit of truth to the need on the west side, but I don't think it's the $120 million Taj Mahal facility that they would like to build. They could build a much smaller, scaled down facility to handle that public need.
And to be clear, it's a transfer facility, but it's also a recreation center. It's a lot more. There's a lot more amenities that they're trying to put in the community, which may be great for that community, but these are two separate things, and they should be approaching the public separately on those two issues, not trying to hide it in the
City of,
front
the
process.
city of Portland had literally a city charter amendment that failed because they wanted to use water money for those kind of improvements. And they were slapped down and said, no, water needs to be spent on water. So should garbage only be spent on garbage? That's what has normally been done for the most part, from what we can tell. But
So, Chris, I think you were talking about that 2018 solid waste plan that Metro did.
Yes.
Was that adopted, and is it that section 16.5 that requires them to do a feasibility study? Are they bound by that, or is that just a recommendation?
It's solid waste plans are adopted, and when you go through, you always look at, when you update the plan, you look at the last 10 years and said, okay, what were the needs 10 years ago? What was completed? What's still outstanding? So there's nothing in these plans that requires Metro or any other jurisdiction to absolutely do them. It's kind of a guiding memo. It's a guiding document, and it can move and change as necessitated by the elected body, and that often happens.
But their own guidance says they need to do a feasibility study.
Yeah, when you're spending this kind of money. Like I said, the other issue with capping tons, especially in Washington County, if you understand that the growth in Washington County, south of Hillsborough and north of Sherwood is going to be happening. If you cap that tons, then you're requiring, the haulers to drive into Metro Central. When the closest facility is either in Sherwood, it's at Hillsborough Garbage, it's at Forest Grove, and so you're requiring those haulers to make additional travel time and at an additional cost. So the irony is that the way Metro's established that the tonnage caps is they're requiring haulers to drive more miles, which is in conflict with their transportation plan. It's trying to reduce the miles traveled.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they recently do a study where they looked at how the waste is hauled around the county, looking to improve efficiency, and they found that the haulers were already doing it very efficiently?
I recall the stuff. I didn't see the specifics on there. I just remember talking with the individual haulers are going to be impacted, and they said the same thing. They looked at rings, and you can do a ring out and estimate, but when you're stuck in traffic, and the run cost of those trucks is $100, $110, and plus all of them are CNG. You've got a limited amount of fuel to take that day. You've got time and windshield time, which is incredibly expensive. And so Metro kind of capitulated on that reduction or they capitulated to the sense that they agreed with the haulers and said, yeah, it would be better for the system for them to go where they should be going.
So I'm not at all happy with Metro. Shocker. The one thing that you hope they would do well, and be transparent about it, they're not. The reason they were formed originally. Hopefully we'll learn more Monday.
Who's invited to that Monday morning meeting?
I'll forward it out to all of council. Anybody can call in.
Yeah, the meeting invite or the email was sent out blind copied, so I sent it to Joe. I was like, "Did you get this? Who got this?"
Yeah.
So I forwarded it to all of our city and county partners just to make sure they were aware of it. But I don't know who it was sent to really.
Okay. I will forward it to council as we right now.
So Joe, what is it you needing to know from us? Whether to hold off till after that December 3rd date?
You're muted. You're muted.
I heard Kim.
I'm on.
Not Joe.
I got kicked out for a while and had to come back in, and for some reason, sorry about that. If you put the Metro tipping fee issue aside, our consultant's recommending small increases in roll carts and commercial. One option is to proceed with that. The downside to that is if you just do that and Metro does a tipping fee increase, you could be doing another rate increase on top of customers right away, and I don't think that feels really good in terms of at any point. So one route is to do a small rate increase, consider one in December. I can bring that back and go that route. The other is to hold off on anything and let this play out. We'll know soon enough what's going to happen and then come back with whatever the rate increase is in December. In terms of resolution, it may not be effective January 4th because of timing, but so that to me is at least two different options, is to just not do anything and wait until Metro makes a decision, or do a small increase.
And the small increase that we talked about for the commercial rates, I mean, we went through that detail, I think, back in July, if I remember right. I mean, my 2 cents is we should move forward with that, but given where Metro is on this tipping fee increase, and it feels like the opposition is building pretty strongly out in Washington County with the cities, that I really think we need to wait and get involved in the opposition as well.
Doug, get your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. So I certainly don't want to do 2 back-to-back increases, nor do I want to preemptively do an increase before Metro does. So to me, I'm wondering if we could write the ordinance in such a way that it's there's like a contingency built into it, right? Like the rate will go up by this amount no matter what. And by the way, if Metro passes this other thing, it'll also go up by an additional amount. And then we could communicate that way too.
So I'm going to let Josh chime in. It's not an ordinance, it's just a resolution. So you can do this in one night. That's okay. Josh, is that something feasible from your standpoint?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I can't think of any reason why that wouldn't work. That's a good idea.
Renee?
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines as Doug, but then the other thought that I had was, if we didn't want to go that way, was going ahead and doing the small increase, but in the increase letter mentioned that there could be another because of the tipping fee, but that might get some of the community members riled up enough to start complaining as well.
Kristen?
Yeah, if I may, just to clarify a little bit on the potential Dropbox increase, the proposed increase that's on the table, regardless of what Metro does, is on the operational costs, and the disposal component of Dropboxes is a pass-through. So, if the disposal rate goes up in February, then the disposal rate goes up for a customer. So in terms of that piece, that could be worked on regardless, again, of what Metro is doing with the disposal component. And then with the proposal that Councillor Scott brought up, if we were to go that route, again, if Metro doesn't do anything, residential wouldn't necessarily need an increase. So you would only have to kind of approve that if Metro passed the rate increase. And then on the commercial side, I guess what I'm saying is that would, from our perspective, that could work relatively well, because right now I think we're scheduled to go to a council meeting on December 1st. So we would know after December 3rd, when Metro held their council meeting, that would give us a week in advance of billing to get those notices out, so people would actually have them in hand before they potentially received a bill with a January 1st new rate on it. So just my 2 cents on that.
Tim?
Sorry, I keep forgetting about that little hand icon. Given the lack of transparency, how confident are we on the rate they're actually proposing? I mean, could it change, between now and the 1st? So if we try to do something preemptive in an ordinance, are we even confident we know the number at this
It's a
point?
resolution, not an ordinance.
I'm sorry?
It's a resolution, not an ordinance.
Or I'm sorry, resolution. Are we even confident we know what it's going to actually be?
So in theory, following Doug's idea, it could be a resolution saying, if Metro does nothing, the rates go to this. If Metro does a 50% of their suggested increase, we raise the rates to blank. If it goes to 100% of what they're telling now, it can go to blank. Right, Josh? We lost
Sorry,
Josh.
couldn't find my mute button there. Yeah, I mean, you could do something tiered like that, I guess. If you're happy with that granular level of accuracy as far as what the rate increase would be. If Metro does something completely unexpected, then you may not have a tier that seems appropriate, but you could do that, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if that handles the most likely scenarios, and then something else comes out of left field, then we got to come back to the table anyway. So.
Right.
And I would just add that I think at some point this would go to a council work session before they would bring it to a council meeting to vote on. That's typically the process. So I would hope that if they followed that normal process, that there would at least be some idea of how council feels about the proposed increase, because I've been in work sessions on other topics where they've surprised me and asked staff to go back and work on something more and not take it to a vote at a future meeting. So I would think that one way or the other, there would be more certainty about, yes, we want to move forward with this, or no, come back with a different rate, or take it off the table altogether.
Doug?
So if Metro does do this and we end up doing the rate increase, I would like the messaging to the rate to the payer to be very clear and very unambiguous about where this increase is coming from and what's driving it and where it's not coming from. So I just want to get that out there.
Tim?
Yeah, well, two things on just to amplify what Doug said. Yeah, that has to be absolutely clear, and it can't just say, tipping fees, because no one knows what that is. It says Metro is increasing fees. I also go back.
Sorry, we have a great partner in Pride, and I don't want them to get thrown under the bus on this.
Exactly, and I would add, Joe, I've talked to you about this before. At some point we need to revamp our utility bills to clearly lay out where all these fees come from. But I have a question more for Keith on this. If we pass something now that anticipates an increase, like we've been talking about, from a political standpoint in the region, what does that look like to Metro? Do they look at that and go, oh, well, they're already assuming it's going to pass. They're already ready for it. So, I mean, are we creating
I think we could certainly do a staff report that puts a couple cuts into their side.
I mean, I would believe the message is starting to get back that the region is not happy with this and wants more information, which is why some of us received the email about the Q&A on Monday. That came out of the blue. And I know calls have been made. I know city managers that have called Metro officials, and I'm anticipating electeds will probably be doing the same over the coming weeks. So. Okay.
Is there any sense that there's a rush to get this done at Metro in December because they're going to have a new council makeup starting in January?
No, really? Really? Try to do something before they get new voices around the table? Come on, Tim, please. Shame
That
on
would never happen, right, Mr. Mayor?
I bring it up because that gets to, how rushed are they going to be, and are they going to have additional work sessions to work through it if they're trying to get this through?
Yeah. But I think there's going to be a lot of heat on them. I mean, I know the Metro mayors are not happy. It's 25 city leaders with a complete lack of information.
Could maybe a suggestion, we could do a companion resolution, basically saying that we don't support the fee increases. Yeah, that gets forwarded on to Metro.
I mean, we can even do that next week.
Yeah,
Right.
you could do that on the 17th.
In advance, and
As soon as possible. Yep.
Yeah. Great concern about the lack of transparency on all these topics. When we're trying to put something together like that with the Metro mayors, I don't know if they're trying to be nice and just say, where's the detail? Where's the evidence? Where's the argument? And so far, the only thing that the mayors of the metro area have received is the email today for a Q&A on Monday.
That's where all the answers are going to be.
Yeah. No, it's going to be, I think it's going to be shabby. Just a hunch.
So does Joe have what he needs?
Yeah, actually, I have enough information and ideas and perspective to move forward. So I think just to recap, we will draft a resolution for next Tuesday, a week from tonight, basically raising significant concerns and I'll talk to folks about, and Josh can help, opposing this because of the lack of information and transparency. And then we'll also work on something for December 1st to implement rate increases as we've discussed, and just keep a very strong eye and watch what happens over the next few weeks. So, and I will continue to share information, and I know the mayor will, what he hears with regional mayors, and Pride has been very good at sharing information they receive. So I think we have a strategy. So that's what I was looking for.
Cool.
Yeah, and by the way, thank you, Kristen, for spending that 45 minutes on the phone with me, educating me on the details of how all this stuff works. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to do it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll let you guys go.
Unless you want to stay.
Unless you want to, you can stay on. It's public.
I actually was a little bit curious about the other topic, so I might stay on.
Stay on, or you can watch it on YouTube at the same time.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll move on to recreational marijuana. So we have an initiative that passed, and which we will need to adopt, but that we have some questions. I've had, I think, 3 meetings on this already. So Josh, do you want to take the lead?
Sure. Yep. So as the mayor mentioned, we're here talking about the ballot measure that passed last Tuesday, and this is kind of an opportunity to talk about the impacts and next steps, and also answer any questions that councilors may have. So there's a lot of issues to discuss, but I think I'll start with taxes, and then we can go into talking about the land use regulation and other regulation portion of it. As councilors are all aware, but for the benefit of anyone watching on YouTube, there are state taxes and local taxes on recreational marijuana sales. The city was previously not eligible for any of the state tax revenue because of the prohibition on recreational marijuana facilities that was in effect in the city. Because this has been or will be repealed, the city will be eligible for that again. It's shared revenue. There's a formula that's used to calculate how much the city gets, and it's very difficult to project the amount that the city will be receiving because there are so many variables. There's obviously the sales volume, how much total revenue is brought in by the state. The formula uses population and number of facilities in the city, which of course could vary over time. But most importantly, the other thing that was on the ballot in November was Measure 110, which, among many other things, made changes to how the statewide recreational marijuana taxes are allocated. And specifically what that did was it put a cap on the amount that is allocated for the various things that it has been allocated for over time. And everything over that cap is now going to be allocated towards drug treatment facilities that were established by that ballot measure. That cap alone, David Bodway did a little bit of estimating, and that alone means about a 2/3 reduction, somewhere in the ballparks of 2/3 reduction, compared to what we had been previously expecting that the state shared revenue amount would be. But importantly, that also means that we're not going to see the benefit of the dramatically increased revenue that the state has been seeing in the last year, which may have been due to the pandemic. We don't know exactly, but we won't see any benefit of that because there's a hard cap. So there's some indication that the legislature may make some changes to how that all works. As it stands now, it would be an enormous amount of money that would go into just the drug treatment facilities, perhaps maybe more than is needed for that. But of course, once the state legislature starts to tinker with that, it's not at all clear that their outcome would be to the benefit of cities. So a big unknown in terms of how much our state tax revenue would be. But I think the long story short is it's probably going to be less than we were expecting. The good news on the state piece is that there are no restrictions on the use of that revenue. The city can use that for whatever it wants. Any questions on the state piece before I move on to the local piece, where we'll need a little bit more direction from council?
Josh, I just have a question. Sorry, go ahead, Kim.
No, you go ahead, Sean.
Well, I was just going to ask, I know when Measure 91 passed in 2014 or whatever it was, there was some questions and some additional legislation that happened after that passed, right? To reorganize or redistribute some of those tax revenues. And so I think to what you were saying, I think that's probably on the table. I imagine that people are going to be looking at that because, like you said, I don't know that that $45 million cap is entirely reasonable for across both of those uses for that money. So I mean, so that's certainly possible, right? Now, what is briefly, if you could, what is kind of the mechanism for doing that? How does that legislation or those discussions even take place?
Yeah, that's a great question. The legislature has made a number of changes since Measure 91 was enacted, and they've done it through a couple different mechanisms. For a while, I'm not sure if they still have it. They had a joint committee that was, both chambers of the legislature working together on those issues. I'm not sure if they'll do something like that again. But long story short, it's a bill that gets developed and proposed, and it's voted on to make those changes. And I think, to your point, Councilor Garland, I would hazard a guess it's more likely than not that there's going to be some sort of change, if only because there's a lot of money available here that wasn't available before, and we're dealing with a situation where there's there's always a need for money, but maybe more need for money than normal due to the pandemic and other things. So almost certainly there will be some sort of look at changing that.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised when David sent out the estimates. I know, there'd been a lot of talk online about what the projections might look like from the state shared revenue for like the 2021, and we kept saying it was about 69,000. So I was really shocked to see that we now estimate it to be like 25. And that was really the driving force, and what was pushing was all this revenue we were going to get, and now we're not. We won't be unless they remove that cap. So a little disappointing.
Well, and the pamphlet language for that measure was not clear. I don't think many voters understood that they were funding those mental health programs by taking money away from cities.
And schools.
And schools.
Out, which
Yep.
kept the stream active.
Yeah, it's an easy bet that Salem will be redoing that formula.
Yeah, I think the schools will probably get made whole. I don't hold out as much hope for cities.
Exactly.
And
just to give you folks a sense of what the state is collecting, since June, they're collecting a little over $15 million a month
Oh, I think I got it, Mark.
in
I think it's in there.
marijuana tax.
And the measure that passed, it was everything above 11 million.
So
Everything
per quarter.
11,250,000 a quarter. So, yeah. So basically, in 1 month, they've already over collected to where everything on top is going to be moved to that program.
Yeah. So there's just like there's the never-ending battle over gambling revenue. There's going to be a never-ending battle over this revenue. And if, okay.
It's going to end
So that's
Okay.
that piece
So
of
let's
it.
talk about local taxes. So the good news is, Measure 110 didn't do anything with local taxes. Now, of course, the legislature has talked about making some changes to what can be done about local taxes, so that could still happen at some point. Although most of that conversation has been a good thing about raising the limit on how much those local taxes can be. So right now, under the state law, we are limited to a 3% local tax, and that is the amount of the local tax in Sherwood, is that maximum 3%. The ballot measure, the local ballot measure, that restricted those funds to being used for public safety purposes. So those funds are restricted. So there were really two questions when it comes to the local tax revenue, which is how will those funds be used, which you don't need to decide tonight, but then also how will those taxes be collected? We have two options. We can collect them ourselves, or we can contract with the State Department of Revenue to do those collections on our behalf. They would collect them at the same time using the same mechanisms they use for collecting the state tax revenue, and then they pass it along to us minus a small administrative fee. In talking with David, apparently he had some experience with this from when he was at Clackamas County, and they used the State Department of Revenue, as do most municipalities, and that was his recommendation, was to go with that. He said the administrative fee is a lot smaller than the impact would be on a jurisdiction like this to administer something like that on our own.
Tim, you got a question?
Oh, I was just wanted to clarify, Josh, do we have to decide whether we want to have a tax or not, or is it automatic?
The tax is automatic.
Okay.
So that was part of the ballot measure that had been previously approved by voters back in, I believe it was 2016, and then it was carried forward in this ballot measure as well. This ballot measure didn't make any changes to that, the amount of the tax or anything like that, just the designation to public safety.
Yeah, I believe in the last short session, Ontario tried to get that tax rate raised out in Eastern Oregon and failed. I don't know. I know they're going to look at it, but it'll be interesting to see if they increase that.
Yeah,
state.
LOC has pushed for that for a number of years, so far without success.
Yeah.
Kim, have a question?
Yeah, I was not really a question. I was just going to give input. I would be in favor of letting the tax collection be handled by the state, just for one, staffing, and for two, if there's any problem collecting, I think the state has a little more teeth than us as a city, like David was mentioning, kind of in his take. That's my opinion.
I agree with you, Kim, because since it's an all cash business, I don't even know how that would be new territory to try to figure out how you even understand what taxes you need to collect.
I don't know the specifics, but I know that there's a lot of record keeping, so that between all the different parties to make sure that that numbers match up. Supposedly, so many pounds or ounces or whatever that gets grown and then gets sold to different facilities, that the numbers of what they buy and sell all match up. And so, but yeah, when it's 100% cash,
I'm not hearing anyone expressing a contrary opinion. So if that's where everyone's at, we can move forward with starting to develop that IGA, and we'll bring that to council as soon as possible, so we can have that in place, hopefully by the first of the year.
And then just a footer or whatever, as kind of David outlines, of saying that those dollars go to the police fund, and it good enough. I mean, right?
Well, they could go to any sort of public safety, including infrastructure type stuff. So
sure, but
yeah,
I mean,
traffic safety, but
like traffic safety committee.
Yeah, the whole notion is laughable, because we spend a lot of money on public safety, and we're very proud that we do. And so it's just the first 26 grand or whatever we get every year that comes out of this tax, is the first 26 grand that goes to police, and then we add to it until we meet the need that we identify for police.
I think to clarify, the 26,000 you're talking about is the state shared revenue.
Yeah.
The city tax would be potentially
Whatever.
larger.
Yeah.
Whatever the amount is the first to go to police, and then we add whatever else we need to meet the need of the police department, and then we allocate the rest of the general fund the way the council and the budget committee want to allocate it. That's my 10 cents. Keep it simple. So if there is an effort, Josh, if there is an effort in Salem to raise the local rate, or empower cities to raise the local rate, the notion of a cleanup ordinance, is it legal for the city to say that we charge whatever the maximum rate allowed by the state is? So if the state raises it to 4%, it automatically goes to 4%?
That's a great question. So as it stands now, the state law requires that that section of the code that relates to the local tax has to be approved by the voters. So city council can't change that rate. If the legislature allows for rate changes, my hope would be that they would allow city councils to implement that and not have to refer that to the voters each time there's a change in what the rate is. You have to wait and see what the legislature does with that.
Fair enough. Okay, what else, Josh?
Okay, if there are no other questions on taxes, we can dig into the potentially even more interesting part, which is the land use regulations and other regulations for these recreational marijuana facilities. So the drafters of this ballot measure clearly anticipated that the city council would have to adopt some type of a cleanup ordinance, as the mayor just mentioned, if and when this measure is approved. You can tell that from the last page of the ballot measure language, where it lists a number of other sections of the code and says these will be amended to be consistent with the rest of the ballot measure. And as I previously explained to some of you, largely that is amending the various tables and lists in the development code to correspond with what has been changed by the ballot measure. So for example, in the table where it lists what are allowed and prohibited industrial uses in the various industrial zones, we need to amend that table to reflect that now in the general industrial zone, recreational marijuana facilities are permitted, that sort of thing. So at the very least, city council needs to do that. But city council could also consider making other changes at the same time or in the future, much as we talked about as the legislature did with Measure 91 and will likely do with Measure 110. The changes from this ballot measure are changes to the city's code. And so the only process for city council to make any changes is just a typical adopting of an ordinance to amend the city code. So to that end, Julia put together a comparison between the language in this ballot measure and the language for recreational marijuana facility regulations that was developed by the city back in 2016, and which was ultimately there's community involvement in that, community outreach, town hall type outreach and surveys. And then there was consultation with the police advisory board, and the planning commission recommended it to city council, and city council ultimately ended up approving that. But it was contingent on if the measure to prohibit these facilities failed. So it was approved by city council, but it never took effect because that prohibition passed back in 2016. So Julia put together a document that outlines what the differences are as kind of a starting point or a frame of reference. That we sent that out this afternoon. It's the PDF that was attached. I can re-forward that to you, Councilor Young, if you'd like.
It was the second file with the.
It was from Josh.
Yeah, it was from me.
Gotcha.
Julia prepared it, but I consolidated everything and forwarded it.
I just read it, Harris Initiative, and I thought it was the same initiative that had come out the previous time.
Yep.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So we forwarded that as kind of a starting point for consideration for things that you may want to look at if you do want to make any changes. And we need to talk about, at this point, what changes, if any, you would want to consider making and the timing for making those changes. So I highlighted in my message a few areas to consider that I can just kind of run through real quick, and then we can discuss whatever councilors are interested in. So one area that there's some distinction is hours of operation in the ballot measure versus the 2016 language. So there, if you want to look at changing the hours of operation, that's certainly something we could do. The ballot measure allows for a little more open hours of operation than the 2016 legislation did.
Josh,
and of course,
I'm very much in favor of moving that outside of the ordinance so that it could be done by council resolution.
yes. So the other thing is hours of operation and potentially some other areas if we identify them, but that was the one that stuck out at me, is something that council may want to be able to change without having to go through the whole land use code amendment process. Really isn't a land use issue necessarily, so it really doesn't need to be in there. So that would make sense as part of the cleanup to move that out of the land use section of the code and into chapter 5.30, which is recreational marijuana business regulations in general. Another thing to consider is allowing versus prohibiting drive-in, drive-through, curbside delivery. That was prohibited in the 2016 legislation and is permitted by the ballot measure.
Does anyone want to be like Louisiana and have a drive-through drug store?
My question is with regards to the curbside pickup. I know that given the pandemic today, that's an offer or an option by many of the facilities today. Would that be impacted by any kind of legislation that we're talking about here?
We could probably do some sort of a
Emergency.
yeah, and no curbside pickup typically, but except during this time of pandemic, there could be a
If the city's declared
exception.
emergency and said such.
Right. Yeah, we could carve that out however council wanted to do. We could certainly do that.
Yep. Well, I was thinking about this today, and one of the concerns I had was if this is an all cash business, then we have cash going in and out of a car window in the parking lot, as opposed to inside where there are cameras. And it seems like the safety issue is suddenly, I mean, I know there's a COVID-19 issue at the same time. It just, I don't know, it seems we should think about that.
I'm guessing, and I have to know, I mean, right now we're talking about one shop that we currently have. I would guess they have cameras on the outside, but I would definitely want to probably find out for their sake.
So I hate to interrupt folks, but it looks like our YouTube stream went offline. Did everybody else notice that? It looked like when the Planning Commission started, we are no longer streaming.
So Brad, do you want to respond to that? Because I was just going to check.
It's a public hearing, so they have to stream that.
Right. So we
Ours
really
is recorded, so
we can't continue without that public streaming.
We had to stop the work session, so we start planning commission. There, we found out late in the day there was a way to do 2 streams at once, but we thought this meeting would be ending before the planning commission, so we could time it right. But
I didn't.
Mark and I were working
I'm
feverishly to try and get that second stream going about 20 minutes
I'm just
ago, and
concerned.
Is it still being recorded so it can be
Yeah.
posted at least?
it will get posted on
Correct.
YouTube in its entirety.
Perfect.
That
And
should
there's
cover
no
us then.
issues with the governor's or the Josh, the public meeting rules around that.
So we do have to have a method for the public to listen in or observe in real time. So Brad, did you say that you're working on it?
We
Does that
have,
count for a work session as well?
Any public meeting?
I'm just concerned, especially for this topic. The optics are horrible. That all of a sudden.
So we're just all gonna pause, and
Yeah.
Josh just said that we're gonna end this meeting in a minute if we can't create a second YouTube.
yeah, it would probably stop the planning commission meeting, and we'd have to start that one again too. So
Huh?
there's no way to start a second stream to YouTube without stopping them all and starting them all over again.
Yeah, we have to communicate to the planning commission to take a quick pause too, so we can restart both of them. I think that's probably our best solution.
So do you want me to run over to planning commission and tell them to take a 5-minute pause? Is that how much time you need, Brad?
I think so. Like I said, this is uncharted territory right now. So this is where we were discussing this.
So the other option is we let them continue and we adjourn and come back in a couple days.
Yeah.
So we need to follow the law.
Do you
How about-
want me to tell? I don't want to go tell planning
No,
commission.
pause. I'm asking council. Council, I would imagine it'll take Brad longer than 5 minutes.
I mean, if you
Uh,
can
I would
pause for
say
5 minutes,
reschedule.
I can take another quick look at it. But when we were seeing this meeting was going long, I was working with Mark to try and find a way to get both going at the same time, and we had been talking about this for a couple of days about this being a potential issue, and this is.
So my vote is my opinion is we adjourn and come back.
Yeah.
I agree.
I agree.
Full
Yeah.
transparency. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Joe, can you put some notice out on the city Facebook or whatever saying what happened and that we'll
Yes.
re-adjourn?
Yeah.
Okay.
And-
So everyone review the documents, think about what Josh has already said and the side-by-side comparison that Julie was good enough to put together, and we'll do it. Are folks free on Thursday?
I'm
Yep.
not sure that I will be, but I can try.
Yes.
We'll task Joe with circling back with all of us and
Are there no other meetings Thursday?
There are no other meetings Thursday.
Okay.
see if we can make that work or if we need to do something else.
Good.
Awesome. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Thank you.